Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. In this video, an HOA Karen claims that she owns the entire neighborhood and then breaks into my house claiming she needs to inspect it. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one starts like this. So here in my block we have this neighbor who is just a combination of every bad neighbor habit. To make things more visual, we are mainly talking about half a block here. The majority of the houses are 2 stories except the one in the middle that is a car detailing and accessories store. So basically this store's roof makes every house on this half block visible to each other. So the major complaint is the noise. This guy blasts trash music all day long, which would not be a problem if this guy respected the volume and time allowed. Everyone in the block has called the police already because of the noise after 12 AM at least once. When my family called the police at 3 AM, the police told us that the sound had already exceeded the permitted decibels since before the street began. But I guess money is not a problem for this guy because he just keeps doing it. Since everybody was calling the police on him because of the noise, he then decided to call the police because of the noise of a newborn baby crying. When the policemen arrived, they told the guy to F off, so that was a mini win. Besides, this guy is also a creep that keeps staring through every window. The majority of the neighbors had installed tinted windows or curtains because of this particular guy. I literally could not enjoy sunlight because this dude kept staring at my window whenever my underage sister was in the room. Obviously there's even more, but these were the major complaints. So now, cue the revenge. Since this dude is used to be awake during the night blasting terrible music, he sleeps basically all morning and absolutely hates birds chirping because it wakes him up. You can literally hear him complaining and closing the windows when the birds start singing. So I decided to plan based on that. I asked every neighbor if they were okay with the birds chirping, and the majority said they love it. Then I asked the detailing store if I could scatter some seeds on their roof to attract birds. The owner said absolutely yes, because the guy threw trash at the store's roof, so every single week the owner had to clean the gutters. So then I started scattering the seeds every day at 5 AM on the store's roof, and in less than 1 week I have an army full of birds. I also started putting things like leaves, twigs, dog hair and other things so the birds could build nests nearby. And by the way, for the OG ripe stars, you have to answer one question. What is better than a full army of birds? The answer is, of course, an army of crow bodyguards. Props to anyone who remembers this epic legal advice story. So anyway, in my window there's also water for the birdies, and now the most delicious part of my revenge was when I decided the birds needed a little treat. I have a friend that breeds insects for people to feed their exotic pets, so I asked him for 100 crickets to feed the birds. He gave me an amazing discount, and the next day I was also scattering crickets in that roof. So basically the birds started eating the crickets, but obviously they could not eat them all, so the rest of the dozens of crickets that escaped ran to the nearest shelter, the idiot's open balcony. You may think, couldn't he just kill the birds or something? Well, he tried, but the odds are in our favor because the birds that come chirping on his windows are protected by ambiental law. So if he tries to harm them, he will pay a much more expensive fine than the sound pollution one. Now my block is the only place in the ghetto where you can wake up every day like a Disney princess with more than 30 birds chirping and the sounds of a very distressed evil neighbor. And wow guys, I gotta admit that was one of the best petty revenge stories I've ever read. That is some serious 900 IQ revenge. Props to OP. Either way, if you enjoy these revenge and especially petty revenge stories, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even subscribe to the channel because we are getting closer and closer to 130,000 subscribers. Thank you so much, and the next one is the title story, which is titled HOA Karen Thinks She Owns the Entire Neighborhood. So I moved into a neighborhood with the HOA being very honest and upfront about the fact that they were strict. They did not try to hide anything when they introduced themselves and gave me a copy and the rules letting me know they were strict about them. Yes, looking back, it was a red flag, but this neighborhood was in my price range and easy to commute to work and back from. I figured that I could follow rules without much of an issue. My father was an army guy, so having things a certain way was not exactly new for me. One member of the HOA that I met turned out to be the woman who lived next door to me. She seemed very different than everybody else at first and came off just colder. I don't think I ever saw this woman smile, but she had these kind of bugged out eyes. It turned out that she decided it was her sworn duty to be an enforcer and keep a sharp eye on everybody around her. Especially the new neighbor who she assumed would not be able to follow the rules. Despite it not being a fun or easy read, I made it through their list of bylaws, and on the surface nothing too crazy or too difficult was there. Grass length, decorations, house color, etc. I was not exactly inclined to paint my house purple or let the grass get long, so I was just going with the flow and trying to fit in with everybody else. After a couple of weeks though, I started to get warnings from my neighbor, which was when I fully learned that she was a true Karen. It seemed that whenever I would walk out of my house, she would complain about something and tell me that I was not following HOA rules. All of the things that she said were either minor or totally made up and not in the bylaws. Just because I think they are funny, I'll give you a couple of my favorite examples. So I had some flowers planted and a couple of them had yet to fully open up. She told me that my garden was not uniform enough and I couldn't just have some of my flowers not sprouted at the same time as the others. I was confused and questioned how I was supposed to control that. Her suggestion was to either force them open or remove them completely. I pointed out to her that there was nothing about that in the guidelines they gave me, and she just made up something about certain rules being implied and just common sense. I brushed her off and went to do whatever I was doing that day. Another complaint she had was that my car made noise when I turned it on. Not any abnormal noise either, but just a general noise a car makes when being turned on and the engine goes. She pointed out that there was no excess noise allowed in the neighborhood and that it was in the bylaws this time. I told her that everybody's car made noise when turned on and it was not a thing that I or anybody else could control. There were other things, but those two were the funniest and most noteworthy ones I remember. At this point though, Karen has started actually giving me fines for this crap, and I tried to speak to her like a rational human being about why I am doing nothing wrong and that if she has a problem with me, to just tell me instead of this passive-aggressive garbage. Instead of stopping or her acting like somebody over the age of 6, she instead takes things even further. I cannot go outside without seeing Karen peeking over the fence and taking little notes in a pad that she has with her. In addition, she has her phone, which is clearly being used to take pictures of my property and seemed to be aiming at my windows. Windows that I tend to keep the blinds and curtains closed on, so she was not able to see anything. Still, it was at this point that I was getting fully creeped out and wanted her to just stop it. She was invading my privacy and making me feel like I was constantly being watched, which, I mean, I kind of was by her. I saw her again with the phone and notepad and had enough. Me, stop it already. Karen, excuse me? Me, you're snooping around my property and watching everything I do. It's creepy and a total invasion of my personal space and privacy. It's enough. Karen, I have a duty and a right as an HOA member to make sure that everybody is following the bylaws and being an asset to the community. Furthermore, I am literally the owner of this neighborhood. Me, I don't care what you think. Stop taking photos of me and my house. Karen, only somebody with bad things to hide would keep their blinds closed. Me, I keep them closed because you are nosy and keep trying to look in my windows. I don't know how else to explain to you that it is creepy what you're doing. I have nothing to hide that is of any importance to you as my neighbor or an HOA member. Karen, I have the right to inspect what I want. Me, you have no right. Stay away from my property or you will not like what happens next. I may have seemed a little aggressive, but I had to. It was the only way I was going to potentially get through her thick skull. It didn't work though, because I came home from work early one day to find Karen inside of my house. Not looking over the fence or even trying to look in my windows, but just inside my house. She had literally broken in and was looking through all of my stuff. So engrossed in it that she didn't even notice that I came home and saw my side door had looked like somebody took a crowbar to it. She was too busy writing my files in her notepad. I did not let her know that I was home quietly and instead got close up behind her and screamed, scaring the hell out of her. It was worth it and she deserved it, as I was still screaming and demanding to know why the hell she broke into my house. She went off again, claiming that she had the right to, as an HOA board member, to do surprise home inspections. letting me know that I had a lot of fines coming to me from what she had uncovered so far. The one thing she mentioned being the fact that I had dishes in my sink. The dishes being a single bowl, spoon, plate and cup from breakfast. Horrendous. I know, I should have been locked up for life for that abomination. I told her to get out of my house, but she refused, claiming that she was actually in the right and was not yet done with her inspection. She still had to go upstairs, which was just not gonna happen on my watch. I'm an adult and I didn't want Karen going through my private things up there. I called the police saying that somebody had broken into my house and just would not leave. She heard me make the call too, but did not care because she was still so sure of herself being in the right and not going to get in trouble for any of this. Finally, the police arrived and she told them that she was just the HOA inspector and that they did not need to worry about anything. I told the police that she did not have permission to be in my house and especially not going through and taking pictures of my things. The police made her stop and had a conversation with her to try and get to the bottom of what was happening because I admit it was probably a little confusing of a call for them. Karen explained that she was an HOA board member with such a snobby attitude that made her above the police even. That this gave her the right to inspect people's homes to make sure that they were complying with the HOA rules. They shut her down fast and explained that she was not allowed to trespass no matter who she was, and even if an HOA by law gave her consent to do so, the law did not and it was more powerful than the HOA by law. She then was getting arrested, but instead of complying with police and staying calm like she had been, she started screaming and throwing my own things at me. Thankfully, they were able to quickly handcuff her and take her squirming body to the police car for breaking and entering as well as clear destruction of property. Basically telling me that it would be in my best interest to pursue a lawsuit in order to keep Karen away from me, which I did do. In the meantime though, with Karen busy with the police and trying to make bail, I decided to go to the next HOA meeting and bring up everything that happened. Explaining that I moved to a nice neighborhood and had been getting harassed since day one because of Karen, leaving out no details with the rest of the board looking genuinely shocked. I know sometimes they are all guilty and throw one person under the bus, but I don't think any of them actually knew what this Karen had been doing in their name. So then the board was quick to vote and remove her from the board as well as speak to me afterwards privately to apologize and offer help with anything I needed. The only thing left for me to do was make sure that legal action Karen faced were severe enough to stop her for good. I know many of you will be sad to hear that she didn't go to prison or something for what she did. The charges were minor enough that she was able to get off probation. However, she was also going to be forced to go to anger management meetings to talk about her aggressive behavior. Since she did throw things and apparently wasn't great once arrested either, she had to turn over her phone as evidence with all of the photos being deleted from inside of my house. Finally, she was going to need to pay to replace the door that she had broken to gain access to my house. I think the loss of HOA power was a worse hit to her ego than any of the legal issues she faced. She was also told to leave me alone from now on, so despite still living next door, she now treats me like I'm invisible. The best thing ever in my opinion, because I also want to pretend that she doesn't exist. The HOA apparently has some new things in place to check on board members and make sure they are not doing anything crazy like Karen did. So far things have been peaceful and I just cross my fingers that it would stay that way, because at the end of the day I really do like living here. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you still enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to leave me some star emojis in the comments if you want to show your support. Thank you so much, and the next one is a very juicy malicious compliance story. So I work at a small store, my manager quit and the AM got fired for stealing money, 2 other employees quit because of the new workload and I'm now stuck doing all of it. So I told my DM, I'll expect a temporary increase to $29 per hour plus overtime to account for the extra work outside my job description. The amount is not random, it's the sum of mine and my manager's wages. Expect me to do the work of 5 people? Well, then you better pay me. He says no though, and that I'm not expected to do any more than my agreed upon job description. His exact words were, just keep doing your job, nobody is expecting you to do the others' jobs as well. So I do just that. I don't do the deposits, the security briefings, the sales reports, the containment inspections, etc. All tasks that are outside my job description. So then my DM gets mad, saying none of the work is done. You told me you were not going to approve my temporary wage increases because you were not expanding my job tasks, so therefore I did only my job. He threw a fit about me obviously misunderstanding him, and I stopped and told him, I didn't misunderstand you. I told you I would not do extra work without extra compensation. I should also mention I went from working 15 hours a week to 75. He called me lazy and greedy because I just want to make a buck. Yeah, that is indeed how this whole employment thing works. You need the job done, I agree to do the job for payment, you pay me to do the job, so I quit. Have fun working the entire store by yourself without overtime because you are an exempt employee DM. And the next one is another malicious compliance story. So I briefly worked as a probation officer. A client came in and appeared to be sick. This was just before the pandemic, but he was doing awful. I said, alright, we're going to reschedule to next week. Have a good day. He starts arguing, saying, no, I need to do this today. I said, you're coughing and sneezing. I don't want to get sick. Client, I threatened my ex for not letting me see my kids, and I think I ate a pot brownie at a barn party. Me, what? Why are you telling me any of this? Client, because I had a lot going on. At this point, I emailed my supervisor for permission to check his phone as well as alert that we may have to take someone into custody. So as I'm waiting for my boss to give me approval to search his phone, I need to get statements about what he was doing, so apparently he was threatening to just go see his ex despite a no-contact order and then went to a barn party and consumed weed. He was getting angry that it was taking me so long for his meeting. I said, you admitted to a bunch of violations and I now need to document each one. He of course was pissed off and said, my mom drove me here and has another appointment. I said, I guess you should have taken up my offer on rescheduling then. So I do a drug test, shows positive for THC, it's not legal here. I go through his phone and he definitely overstated what he intended to do. It was more baby mama drama than actual bodily harm. The point is, I had to wait to make that call. I'm not sure what happened to the guy, but please, when your probation officer asks to reschedule, don't say a word except okay. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. So I am a middle-aged man living in a small neighborhood in Massachusetts. It is not an affluent area, but I enjoy being surrounded by trees and being only 5 minutes away from everything I might need. I work as a financial consultant, a job that might not sound exciting, but I get a good amount of joy out of it. My wife and I raised 2 kids who are now adults with their own jobs, homes and lives. We have seen people move in and out of the area over the years and we have liked some of them more than others, but it's a nice place to live in general. An older man lived right next door to us and we absolutely adored him. He was polite and kind, so much so that we did not feel the need to put up a fence between our properties. I always made sure to pick up things from town for him or help him out with his lawn care on weekends, and he would repay me with a beer and a pleasant conversation. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of months ago. It was peaceful and quick, so we know he did not suffer. He left his property to his grandson Mike, who moved in with his wife Helen after less than a week, which I thought was a little suspicious. It seemed like they had been waiting for him to die so they could move in. They talked about building a fence one day when I was getting in my car to go to work. I offered to build it myself since I'm a good handyman and enjoy making things, but they said something about not trusting me to follow the actual property lines. I shrugged it off, but it did feel like a weird slight against me. I expected the fence to be up within the next few weeks, but no progress was made. Again, I shrugged it off because I did not care if there was a fence between our properties or not. Mike and Helen were not terrible neighbors, but they could be quite annoying. They always seemed to do yard work late at night when my wife and I were already asleep, and it threw our sleep schedules off. We tried to bring it up with them, but they insisted it was not them making noise, but this was clearly a lie because it only started up after they moved in, so it couldn't be anyone else. They also had a tendency to stare at us anytime we were out in our own backyard, no matter what we were doing, and they liked to complain. On more than one occasion, my wife and I would be lounging in the back together with our arms around each other as we watched the birds pick seeds out of the feeder, only to be interrupted by our neighbors. They would loudly speak to each other about how little people value privacy or how disgusting it is to be intimate with someone in public. The worst thing we were doing was holding hands or snuggling, so they had no reason to complain like that, but it did make me hope that they would be putting up a fence just so we didn't have to deal with them anymore. We decided to travel for the holidays and ended up being gone for nearly a month, which I was able to do after saving up my vacation days for a while. We visited family for a bit before going into a bed and breakfast on Cape Cod where we ate good food, explored the nearby shops and spent quality time together. It was fun, but we were excited to get back home. We were greeted by a fence separating our property from Mike and Helen's, but instead of a classic white picket fence that offers privacy, it was a series of posts with wires running between them. It looked a bit like what you might find going around a farm. My wife and I exchanged a look of confusion, but if that's the kind of fence they wanted, I was not going to argue. What I did start to notice was that the property lines seemed off for some reason. Granted, we haven't had anything in place that showed the correct limits of our property, but I could tell from looking that it seemed wrong. I initially approached Mike about it when I saw him outside one day and casually asked if he had double-checked the property lines before putting up the fence, and he just scoffed at me and rudely exclaimed that yes, he had checked. I tried to backpedal a bit as I didn't want to upset him, but I wasn't sure I believed him. I basically let it go because it didn't feel worth it to pursue a pointless fight over a small sliver of property that doesn't really make a difference. Things basically went back to the way they were, including all of the annoying habits our neighbors had, and I was busy enough with work to forget any and all issues going on. I was out in the yard one weekend kicking around a soccer ball just to get some exercise in and to have something to do. I'm not particularly athletic, but I know it's good for me to get some fresh air and move around, even if it is somewhat limited. So I ended up kicking a ball too far and it landed right next to the fence. I jogged over and bent down to pick it up, bracing my hand on the wire when I felt a sudden pain course through my body. I cried out and jumped back as I landed in the grass, and my wife was soon by my side to make sure I was okay. We couldn't believe it. The neighbors had installed an electric fence but did not bother sharing that info with us or putting up any warnings. I was furious and wanted to confront them, but my wife advised against it, telling me that it might be better to contact a professional and take it from there, and I agreed. I got a minor heart defect, so the electric shock likely impacted me more than it would the average person, and it's not out of the question that something like that could have caused significant damage or even killed me. I called up a lawyer who gladly took the case, and I soon learned that it's against the law, obviously, to build an electric fence in a residential area, let alone not having any warning signs to stop people from approaching them. While I was at it, I brought up the issue of the property lines because if I was gonna get them for the fence, you better believe I want to take on as much as other stuff as possible. They tried to claim that they didn't know about the true property lines, which is an obvious lie, and that they hadn't known an electric fence was illegal to construct. Unsurprisingly, the judge did not have a favorable opinion of them, and we won the lawsuit. I don't think we took enough to leave them bankrupt, but they did have to sell the house in order to have enough money, and not having to live next to them anymore is definitely a win. All I could think about was how easily it could have been a child or a small animal that touched that fence instead of me, or how quickly I could have lost my life because of their stupidity. And yeah, ripe stars, I would not even just say that these neighbors were stupid, but they were completely out of touch with reality. Who in their right mind thinks it's a good idea to put up an electric fence in a residential area? SOP said it is so easy for children or even pets and other animals to touch the electric fence and seriously get injured. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads, and also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.